they haven't launched strikes yet, but
I know, that's what I was saying. We can move
hello,
for half
everybody.
an hour.
No, Alia and I both sort of amused by the fact that Trump making all these threats, but nothing's really moved yet. The needle hasn't moved. The situation hasn't moved since we spoke with Colonel Daniel Davis about an hour and a half ago. So be sure to go and watch that one if you haven't already. We've got Amir Hajani coming up afterwards as well. But the reason why I have been chatting with so many great people is because the imminency of going back to war seems intent on Trump's mind. At the end of the last conversation, I emphasized that Trump himself had decided that because of the lack of movements of the peace talks, he was threatening war again. So he's shifting from carrot to stick. But also because the Apache downing was sort of a point of no return, or a point that could not go unanswered. But we're joined again this time by Alia Brahimi, who is a regular at this point in the past couple of weeks. And Alia, it's nice to see you. I know we had you on for like a three-way conversation, which was great fun with Al and Ira a few days ago. But do you think we're going to see strikes? Do you think we're going to see some military action? I guess that's the key question, just to get to the bottom of it.
Well, it's sort of looking like it, but Trump keeps holding his own feet to the fire, right? So he's the one who said there are going to be strikes today. So I think we should assume that that's likely. But he also said, 48 hours ago, he was saying that we're going to win this in the next 2 weeks. So, one of my colleagues at the Atlantic Council, he said this on Monday at a campaign event. He's like, this is going to be done in 2 weeks and we will have defeated Iran. But one of my colleagues at the council, he always says that's about Trump trying to calm the oil markets, because he keeps saying, a settlement, an end to this is around the corner. But a part of me thinks that he does sort of believe it, and he's sort of trying to manifest it. But tonight, certainly, from what he said, it looks like he may have given up in that task. But, you say there aren't any, huge developments, and there aren't really. But I think one thing to watch is actually what happened this morning is the US hit 2 water reservoirs in southern Iran. So that's left 20,000 people in Iran without water. And I think that target choice, well, it's probably, a war crime or war crime adjacent. But I think it also instantly makes vulnerable, actually, water treatment and desalination plants in the Gulf. And the Gulf states depend on these type of facilities for between like 70 and 90% of their drinking water. And remember what I keep saying about the Gulf states being taken as strategic hostages? Well, this is what I mean. They're saying you hit that type of target, we're going to hit the same in the Gulf. So it's a kind of an eye for an eye, except in this case, it's an eye for someone else's eye. And just another thing I'd mention is just the drone maths. You mentioned the downing of the drone. I think we're seeing the drone mathematics in full motion and on full display. So that $50 million Apache helicopter was taken down intentionally or otherwise by a $30,000 drone. Right. So welcome to the future of warfare, where the kind of economics favor the insurgent. Was it accidental? I don't know what you think, Peter, but that's one possibility. Another is the lack of unity, maybe within the command of the IRGC, which has got many subgroups, and a lot of them are keeping a low profile and probably not communicating very much or even agreeing. So that's another possible explanation.
No, there's a couple of directions I'd like to take it now, but it's the reason I like chatting with you is because you sort of summarized and very simply put just then what perhaps I've been badly articulating. But yeah, I didn't realize that. It's true. A helicopter was downed by a drone, an Apache, a staple, Black Hawk Down, not just in military conflict, but in pop culture. It has been downed by the defining aspect of modern warfare, and other than maybe social media. But that's insane, actually. And what that means, I need to get some more chats with some people who cover drone warfare quite a lot,
Yep.
actually. But yeah,
well, there's a lot that's been learned from Ukraine. So you can argue across cases or sort of test across cases, because Ukraine has been through the whole arc of this. And yeah, that's certainly been a testing field for this type of new kind of asymmetrical financial positioning in war, because the Ukrainians are constantly trying to reduce their costs with the little that they have. And so they've really optimized. And yeah, a lot of that is using, cheap drones. But anyway, so even a Ukraine expert, I think, could help you sort of sketch out what the future might be in other contexts.
Well, I should actually say we had a really interesting chat with The Economist, an expert from The Economist, everyone. What I post on the YouTube channel is not always what I post on the audio only. There was one individual who didn't want to be on camera, so we posted earlier today. Anyway, that's a small plug. But what I do want to ask you, Alia, is simply, what's your interpretation of the fact that they struck dams? Right. So just to lay the land for people watching and listening, this is a response, or it was a response from the downing of the Apache, which Trump couldn't be allowed to do, couldn't go unanswered. And that was because of at the behest of Hegseth and General Kane, or Joint Chiefs of Staff General Kane. And so they responded by targeting what they claim to be drone facilities and other critical infrastructure, which is sort of a bit confusing, because I thought the point was that they were going to destroy all of the military capabilities of Iran anyway. So what is it that they're striking if they didn't take everything out already? But then it turns out that dams have been destroyed for a 20,000 populated city. I'm not sure that's proportionate nor legal under international law, unless there's combatants that are living in that city. But still, that's a bit grey. So tell me, how do you make sense of that?
Well, it's possible. It's possible that they were trying not to kill anyone directly, and so I think that maybe the idea was to not respond too aggressively. I don't really know. It could have been, that it was Trump was trying to be sort of performative in his response. And I think part of that is the restraining force of that congressional vote that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And I think that part of that is also, as we've been saying, he just wants to get off of this particular ride. He's done, he needs to lie down. But of course, there's no getting off. The roller coaster has an escalatory logic of its own, as we're seeing. And I think he's afraid of not just looking weak, but looking even weaker, and of being accused of kind of like dripping or leaching the US's blood into the water. But, we know that peace talks have been ongoing in Doha through Qatari mediators. And apparently, allegedly, it's the Iranis who didn't want the face-to-face. So maybe that explains his sort of frustration right now. But I think what's strange from that hawkish camp within the US, because he is feeling that counter pressure, is the kind of that blind faith in military power, which is what got the US into this mess. Let's not forget their presentation and their paradigm at the beginning of all of this, substituting strategy with just like, a military campaign that seemed to be, as confusing as to what ends it was serving. But I think it's unlikely to get them out of this at this stage. If it didn't before, it's not necessarily going to work now. But I think if we do see things, restart in the Gulf, we'll also most likely see a massive escalation in Lebanon, because, the Israelis never miss an opportunity to escalate. Not that the IDF isn't still bombing Lebanon, it is. But anyway, my point is that the region is really on a knife edge tonight. And I think President Trump, to your question, he didn't feel that was enough, or he's being told that, it doesn't appear that response was strong enough. And I think his frustration with the uncertainty is definitely a sentiment that's shared by millions, if not billions of people globally. And I saw that you called this episode "No Going Back," which is of course true, but everyone wishes we could go back. We can't. Time is a one-way street, right? So the only way out is through. But unfortunately, nobody knows what that looks like, because the enemy gets a vote, as we're seeing.
No, for sure. I just meant To be honest, there's only so many phrases or ways that you can frame something, caption something before you regurgitate
Yes,
it.
absolutely.
What do I put? No going back, no answer to. The point
I like it.
I'm getting with it is that simply that if Trump chooses to undertake this conflict, there is no going back to the conditions that we have right now, which are not exactly perfectly favorable, but
True.
they're only going to get worse.
No, you're
Maybe I
right.
should have just titled it only going to get worse. I don't know. Or just
I like no going back. I like the kind of metaphysical, dimension as well.
Yeah.
Prompting us all to meditate on time and existence. But
no, I used to have editors to do this sort of thing, and then I fired them all because it was like just pointless. I could do it myself.
No, I think it's great. I think it's great. I didn't mean to suggest it wasn't.
What I need, everybody, is you to like and subscribe the video if you're watching on Subscribe to the Substack as well, because we're streaming now. But Ali, actually, just to have a mention, you have a great podcast as well, which I've been listening to quite avidly the past couple of weeks, which I recommend everyone to check out. It's where can people actually find it? It's on the Atlantic Council website, right?
But it's on iTunes, Spotify, and Brahimi, all the streaming sites. Something pod. There's so many of them. But yeah, the last episode, if your listeners are interested in US foreign policy, because the podcast is about mercenaries, and you'd think that's quite niche, but it covers so many different areas right now because they're making a comeback and they're everywhere. Maybe we can do an episode on that one day. But the latest episode is about US mercenaries in Yemen and a hit squad that was sent in there to kill a bunch of people, of political opponents. And it's a big drama, but they're now in the dock. Well, they will soon be in the dock in a courtroom in San Diego. So it's quite a drama. Anyway, that was the latest episode. And the one before was with a drone pilot in Ukraine. Again, talking about the kind of innovation that the Ukrainians have pioneered, and the mathematics of drone warfare, that sort of thing, and just how they're adapting consumer technology on the battlefield in Ukraine. So anyway.
No, I mean, so bottom line with this, so let's cut to the chase a little bit more. Do you think that the US, do you think that the US shot down its own helicopter? Do the Iranians actually do it? Because there's some people speculating that this was a false flag, that it's all BS. What do you think is going on there with the downing?
I don't know. I mean, I'll keep my powder dry on that one. I'll defer to the experts when more information is revealed. But I am inclined. So I suppose, what is the skepticism? Is it that there was no drone and that the US?
Well, there's not been any confirmation from the Iranians, and also why, Alia, would be just to challenge you a little bit more. But why would the Iranians do that when they've just said we're going to stop our strikes with Israel, we're going to pause, we're going to introduce a truce? Why would they do that and then be like, oh, screw it, let's take out a US Apache? What that kind of goes against what they did just before, right? Unless it was all part of the plan.
I think, the notion that Iranians aren't involved at all is probably a bit causally over-determining the thing, because there could have been an accident. I mean, I was going to fly on a work trip. You can still fly through the Gulf now, as a transit point to get to places. And my nightmare in my head is that it will accidentally collide with some kind of drone that might just be, doing surveillance or something. So, I think the skies right now are it could be something like that. Or, as I said, it could be a rogue IRGC element. But I really don't know. And I wonder, I hadn't realized that there was such, that people were so dubious about the official account. Not that they've given many details. But did the Iranians even deny it wholesale? I think they just sort of said it wasn't intentional.
No. So what was actually said by Foreign Minister Aragachi was basically that this was a consequence of US actions. He alluded to that the Iranians would respond in force or would be definitive in their response. But without directly, obviously mentioning the United States. And for me, that is about as big an admission you're going to get from the Iranians. You're going to get from the IGC. I'm not pretending to be an intricate Iranian expert, but simply put, they are incredibly savvy diplomatic operators. We've said this many times before. And even while I detest, deplore, loathe the Islamic Republic, you cannot deny the the craftsmanship and skill set that they have in this regard. They are very experienced, and it's quite admirable.
Well, they also all have, they know our culture inside out, and they all have PhDs in game theory and a second PhD in Descartes and Cartesian logic. So these are, they are highly educated and sophisticated actors. However, malignant.
No, absolutely. It's completely, I think, insulting by arrogant Western policymakers, or specifically the Trump administration, to assume that they can somehow outplay, outsmart, outwit the IRGC, the Islamic Republic, when they have been planning for this exact scenario for 50 years. Albeit, okay, it's got different details on it. Didn't imagine drones. We might not have exactly known who would be in power, but the point was they expected that one day maybe the United States and Israel, by extension, would launch some kind of combined operation to take them out. So it's not like they're going to be like, "Oh, you caught us off guard." Excuse me. That's no. So I think Regachi's comments earlier today was indicative of the fact that they did do it, but I just wanted to sort of be slightly provocative by asking you.
Yeah, and I see that some of the listeners are deeply skeptical. That it's
we've got a primarily Western audience. I try to engage dissident or alternative voices for balance because I think it's important, but we're not going to lie that most people we interview or host are of a particular leaning. So a lot of people are skeptical of that. I don't know. I mean, what else do you think happened there? Like, how big a deal is it that an Apache's gone down?
I mean, I think that there's so many twists and turns in this whole psychodrama. Do you remember when a U.S. airman went down over Iran?
in April,
was looking for him. I mean, and then, that was like, whoa. And especially in the U.S. media, because it had like the whiff of success in that they rescued him. So that was a big thing. And, but then, the news cycle moves on so quickly because there's so many twists and turns. So I think that this will probably shrink in significance as we go on as well. But that's not necessarily good news, because I think just bigger, more explosive things are probably, waiting for us. But the negotiations, I don't know what you think, Peter, but the Qataris, are they not, didn't we just say that they're in Tehran right now, aren't they?
Yeah, so the Qatari mediators were, in Tehran on Tuesday to hold talks with Iranian officials about, getting the negotiations back on track. That was after the Iranian and Israeli exchanges, which led to that was the establishment of those talks being held. But then the downing of the Apache sent the whole thing into a bit of haywire. So the Qataris were literally working, well, not in tandem, but their work was coinciding at the same time that the Americans was launching strikes on dams and other targets, and so on. So from today, the Iranians and Qataris have been, doing all this whilst Trump's saying we're going to hit them hard again. They will pay the price. But ultimately, I think the Qataris are, well, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm trying to get a couple of people I know from Qatari diplomatic circles to come on. I think they also have a self-interest in this. It's not only about them trying to be sort of mediators for altruistic sense, right? I think it's they have a certain self-interest. If the Emiratis are being the sort of the middle power that is getting involved in foreign wars from a military standpoint, the Qataris are counterbalancing by being the middle power, trying to get involved from a diplomatic peace broker conflict resolution standpoint.
Yeah. And it reconfers some agency to them, and it does, affect their destiny massively. Plus, some of those frozen billions, I believe, are in Qatar. Some of the 24 billion. There was something else that happened. I think it was Monday, where the head of the IAEA said, we can't move this highly enriched uranium, which was one of the sticking points in the negotiations. We can't move Iran's that 420 kilos of highly enriched uranium. We can't take it out of Iran. Remember, Trump had said it's going to come here to the US. I'm going to take it. And so the IAEA chief said, in my professional opinion, that will be very dangerous. So let's reprocess it inside Iran. So that seemed to be one off-ramp for the president in one of those sticking points. And the other one, of course, is that $24 billion in the frozen bank accounts, which he's going to need another off-ramp for. I wonder if they're going to do that with sequencing. So maybe Iran has agreed to kind of quietly take the money at a later time. But, it's very hard to believe that they would go for that. But, as you say, this war could get really, really ugly, particularly if critical infrastructure continues to be targeted. That indirectly threatens millions of civilians. And then think about the Houthi haven't even been properly activated in the Red Sea. So there's a lot of road left, unfortunately, and a lot of scope for destruction. And then, longer term, there's the Shia factor, which we haven't really discussed before, within some of the Gulf states. So the societal exposure that they have is quite significant. The Iranian leadership is a Shia theocracy, but Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have sizable Shia populations that Iran has sought for decades now to kind of weaponize. And while most Shia in these places have no interest in being agents for Iran, sectarian discontent does exist. There are socioeconomic differences between the way that Sunnis live and certain Shia communities live. But I think more importantly, Iran has worked very, very hard at kind of cultivating cells in these countries. And it's a tap that Iran wants to turn on and off to pressure the monarchies. That's a very sensitive issue. And again, another baby that the Gulf states are going to be left holding, that societal vulnerability, because Iran is masterful, as we've seen, at irregular warfare. So I think that if the US starts or restarts conventionally, Iran will try to go toe-to-toe, like it did exchanging missiles with Israel. But I think what it will be a lot of effort towards is that kind of asymmetric warfare, and God help us. That's that.
Yeah, well, I mean, but is that, but again, to be slightly
sure
provocative, but like, is that such a big, okay, so they use asymmetrical warfare, so what? Like, they're doing it already, how much worse can this get?
I mean, well, we don't know what we don't know. So, I mean, we knew about the Strait, but for example, apparently in the White House, they didn't really know about it. But that's a classic, kind of unconventional tactic that the Iranis would move on turn one, they would shut down the Strait if they were feeling under pressure, right? So everyone knew the Iranians were going to do that. I mean, most analysts, but the White House seemed to have not.
Right, so that's a reflection of the ineptitude of this White House even more than we thought it was.
Well, yeah, the ineptitude, well, your words, not mine, but I think that more than that.
Sorry, well, I'm interrupting you, but I just...
No, I'm at the Atlantic Council. But, beyond values-based judgments, I think what it does reflect is that there were no experts in that room and there are no experts within the policy process. So the fact that, hundreds of war games on Iran and on the Strait have been run over many years. And in turn one, anyone that played Iran would have shut down the Strait of Hormuz. And it's factored into every other president's decision about escalating with Iran. And somehow it seemed to take the administration, certainly the president in his press conferences, off guard. So, yeah, I think the policy process is very different now than it was. And I think that, we hear that Jared Kushner and Witkoff are getting some kind of quick study cheat sheets on nuclear facilities and nuclear weapons. But that's suddenly, I think it was last week, they went for a seminar. But that's a little bit late in the day. And I think this is a symptom of, it's a symptom of the world we now live in. This is just one manifestation of it. But the death of expertise, I should say I have a PhD.
Well, I am currently finalizing. I'm hoping to become a fellow of a institute here in Europe somewhere. I'm not going to tell you which one.
Okay.
I'm in there. It's finalizing. I'm going to be a fellow, everybody.
So well, let's hope it counts for something. Because
right, you're saying that it doesn't.
Very quickly, yeah, I'm saying it's all.
Because I'm not good enough without it, obviously.
No, it changes. They'll be lucky to have you.
I thought about doing a PhD. I thought about doing a PhD when I was younger, but it's sort of, I don't know. I feel like it's a bit pointless at this point. Like, I just want to get going on the career and everything, but I don't know. Anyway, enough self-indulgence from my end. I don't know. Do you want to mention something else? I feel like there was something else. I jumped in too quickly.
No, not at all. What was I saying? I was talking about asymmetric warfare, I think. And I think I just wanted to talk about, we're sitting on the precipice where the war might restart. And I think what we don't take account of enough is just the spiraling repercussions from all of this, right? So the World Food Programme, it was a couple of days ago, they released a statement saying that this war is pushing millions of people into hunger, 45 million people in Sri Lanka, Somalia, and Afghanistan especially. We have that. We have the fuel and the fertilizer crisis from this, impacting a great many poorer nations and their food security. But it's also basic things like aluminium or aluminum for any American listeners. So that's like beer cans and Coke cans. So 9% of global supply comes through the Strait, and the largest smelters in the world are in the Gulf. I think there's a genuine worry from reading the Jordanian press that Israel is going to make a move against Jordan. The Turkish president was saying just a few hours ago that he feels threatened by Israel's attacks in Lebanon and Syria. On top of all of this, I think, unfortunately, the US has shown the world the limits of the military power of the global policeman, I think, which will give huge confidence to China and ultimately threatens to shift the balance of power. And that's before we even talk about Russia. As you know, Peter, Russia's been providing targeting data to Iran. It's been shipping drone components for the Shahed. They've been sharing designs for their battle-tested improvements that they've made and sending them back to the Iranians, because the Russians bought the Shaheds. They call it, their version, the geranium. It's this black thing. And they've sort of souped it up and pimped it up. I think I told you this before. But they've been sort of sending that learning back to Iran. They've been shipping food and wheat through the Caspian. And of course, Russia itself has accrued significant gains. I'm sure you've covered that with other guests, but they've had a shot in the arm for their economy through Trump's oil sanctions waivers and the surging oil price, right? They're making roughly $2 billion a month more than before this war, and they're using that to fund the war in Ukraine. And then there's also the drawdown of the Patriot interceptors from Ukraine. So the consequences are really cascading, but there's no strategic gain, I think, necessarily that anyone could point to. And that's, with the status quo as it is now. So if we were to redouble or double down on that military strategy, who knows what other second order effects we'll be seeing, which I think makes it even more dangerous.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the secondary and tertiary consequences of this, the Trump administration does not have a great capacity to think beyond its own immediate interests, especially Hegseth. His comments in Guantanamo earlier around Cuba indicative of what the Trump administration, or what he seems to be wanting to do. He just seems to want to take a hatchet to everything, a flamethrower. Clearly he was the one who pushed for the renaming of the Department of War. It sounds a lot more sexy if it's Department of War than it is Defense. And in my mind, I just think that what I'm kind of curious is about Kane, General Kane, because I hosted one guest about a month ago who went absolutely ballistic. He's a MAGA knight or maggot, in that he couldn't stand the fact that I was questioning the coherency of the Trump administration, right? That Kane seems to be a lot more like, okay, we need to be calming down or putting the brakes on claiming that the war is going swimmingly, that the United States has decimated this, devastated that, very big use of superlatives and exaggeration, where nothing of the sort has happened. And so Kane is sort of watering that down. And this guest went ballistic, sort of saying that's absolutely not the case. He didn't deny or disagree with Hegseth. It was completely, it was great. You could still find it on the channel, actually, everyone. I just sort of kept him going, and he was trying to force me to give him exact examples of where I said it. It's quite traumatic, actually, but it was just highly intense. The point I'm trying to make simply is that there is clearly a disconnectivity within different parts of the Trump administration. But what I find interesting is why Kane felt this time they had to do more to respond, right? The United States had to do more to respond to the Apache. But the response that they did, to me, still doesn't seem conducive enough to a favorable outcome, or that the conditions are conducive to a favorable situation. And yeah, I just think Trump sort of is like, I really, really don't want to strike, but I'm also really pissed off with the lack of progress. But this leads me to the next point that I'm kind of curious for your thoughts on it, which is that clearly, in my mind, Trump wanted a response from the Iranians 2 weeks ago. That hasn't happened. What's happened in that time? Uptake in Israeli operations in Lebanon. That is a red line for the Iranians. Whilst they're willing to talk, there is no guarantee of a deliverable. There is no guarantee of a deliverable over, say, Hormuz or nuclear enrichment. But Lebanon is a genuine red line, and Hezbollah specifically, that the Iranians will not cross. So basically what's happened in the time, 2 weeks, Israel's taken its military operations, and the Iranians are like, okay, well, we're not going to give you a response on your diplomatic latest proposal, Trump, until the Israelis stop in Lebanon. And they haven't. So we're going to, and then your Apache happens, well, we're going to deal with that, and we're going to respond by targeting Israel. Right? It's quite clear. Trump's getting pissed off with the Iranians not making any progress in the talks or not giving them their response. Yeah, but he's so blindsided that he doesn't see that Israel is the one, or the government is the one that's hindering the process. Help me understand.
Yeah, I think he's understanding that increasingly. But just to your first point, because I don't want to forget it. I just think that, the issue with General Kane and the military, it's his job to manage expectations as to what the military can achieve. So I think that's one thing. And he doesn't necessarily have to be sort of insubordinate or wading in political waters to be doing his job, which is just to manage expectations and to speak from an empirical basis, right? But I think the military ultimately is supposed to support clearly articulated political goals. The fact that they don't have them, is makes their job a lot harder. So they're sort of circling the drain. And I think that must be quite worrying for the military planners right now, because again, if the war were to restart, what are your strategic objectives? And it's just, it's that kind of that dead end, that cul-de-sac that the US policy process hasn't gotten out of yet, right? Israel, you mentioned Lebanon. Israel, I think, is in a very bad situation. So they have the prospect now of not only failing to achieve their objectives in degrading the regime and setting back the nuclear program, and they've actually revitalized the Iranian economy potentially, which is dominated by the military, if they get the sanctions relief. But they'd also emerge from the war with a damaged relationship with the United States and with American society, by the way. And with Israel's international standing gravely diminished. I saw one of your commenters was talking about that. So even if we put Gaza aside, right, we can look at there's one section from the New York Times a couple of days ago. And this is the New York Times, which historically has been very heavily sympathetic to Israel in its editorial. So I think it was like on the 8th of June, I just took these notes down, where there were 4 stories in the Middle East section in the newsletter. 1, the Pentagon raised its counterintelligence threat level for Israel amid concerns about eavesdropping on US-Iran talks. 2, an Israeli strike killed 3 Lebanese soldiers, including a brigadier general, threatening a fragile US-brokered ceasefire. 3, Israel has used white phosphorus over populated areas in Lebanon, visual evidence collected by the Times found. 4, Israeli forces shot and killed a Palestinian infant in the occupied West Bank when they fired on a car. This is from the New York Times in one single day. Those are the 4 Middle East headlines. And the common denominator in all of them is guess who. So I think just the straight reporting of facts around Israel's actions is hugely damaging. And I think Netanyahu faces the prospect of having done all of this for no upside. So it's really a crisis, and I think it militates towards him trying to keep thwarting a ceasefire.
Yeah, I mean, I was having this conversation earlier, and it's, again, from my perspective of trying to be a channel or a show that balances my personal analysis or pseudo analysis with videos or interviews, which is that I like to interview a diverse array of opinions to challenge my own assumptions and preconceptions. But what I've noted is it's quite difficult to host Israeli-leaning or Israeli-aligned voices and entities. I've had a couple, but they are few and far between, and often they're ones that are Israeli, but they're critical of the Israeli foreign policy. If you want to get voices which stand by, largely speaking, Israeli foreign policy as it is right now, very challenging. They don't want to bite because, and it kind of goes me back to, I did a stream earlier this afternoon, and it was Netanyahu had tweeted saying that it's anti-Semitic X or anti-Semitic Y. It's just like anything that is remotely critical of Israeli foreign policy, not Israel, not Judaism, is anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
So it's a very easy sort of get out of whatever, like a what's the word? Just to sort of to blame, and it's intellectually dishonest. It's lazy. But they could do better than that, right? If they're hell bent on trying to eradicate Hezbollah, but there's an alternative, like the French have banned Smotrich and Ben Gvir from entering the country. That's not just a couple of lunatics on the fringes of the political establishment. They're actually in government. Finance minister and defense minister, I can't remember which one it is, right? It's insane. The French have done that, right? They've been one of the biggest arduent supporters of Israel. Macron's always been, we will stand by Israel's right to defend itself.
Absolutely.
And only until last year when they recognized Palestine. It shows you just how quickly it's changing. Bottom line of all of this is that the Israeli government is the common denominator in interfering or impeding peace progress, constantly destabilizing Lebanon, aggravating the Iranians to uptake this more vertical and horizontal escalation, and just generally really alienate so many people who watch the situation and are like, well, what's happening? So
no, that's a good point. And as you say, that's before we even talk about the mass killing. I won't use the G word, but the mass killing in Gaza. But you mentioned, we talked a little bit about, we mentioned our degrees, and mine, I should say, I got my master's before my PhD, and I'm not being smug about it, because just for any of you, because I think it's not I'm not exactly a poster child for these degrees. I don't know that I've done particularly well with them, but I'll tell you that my master's thesis, what you were saying just got me thinking about my master's thesis. And I wrote it about the 1991 loan guarantees dispute between the US and Israel. I don't know if you've ever heard of that case, Peter, but it was one of the few times ever that the US said, enough, no, we call the shots, you listen to us. So this was in 1991 under Bush Sr. And I actually wrote an article about this for Foreign Policy magazine, like maybe a year and a half ago, just to remind everyone that America has pressured Israel before and it can do it again. And so this was this case in 1991, cut me off if I'm getting too historical about it. But after the Gulf War, so in 1991, after the Gulf War, Israeli settlement policy was kind of at breakneck speed. And the Bush administration was trying to get everyone to the peace talks in Madrid, the Arab-Israeli peace talks in Madrid. But as a result, there were some loan guarantees that were due to be sent to Israel, $10 billion worth. And Bush decided, he said, you know what, these should be deferred. This is the wrong time. I'm not sure that we should be sending any money to Israel right now, given what it's doing with its settlements. So AIPAC then, or the Israeli lobby, AIPAC, went into overdrive in Washington and convinced the Senate Majority Leader, the House Speaker, a whole bunch of high-profile people to side with them against the president. They then ordered a massive march on Capitol Hill. But Bush, this is Bush Sr., he dug in and he made the case. He went on television. You can find the video on YouTube, where he said, look, US soldiers have recently risked their lives in the Gulf War defending Israel against Saddam Hussein's Scud missiles. In this fiscal year alone, the US government has provided the equivalent of $1,000 in aid to every Israeli man, woman, and child. So he said, we've done a lot for you. But then he said, which is, something that we haven't heard since. He said, the question for me isn't whether it's good 1992 politics, so whether I'm going to get reelected. I don't care if I get one vote. I'm going to stand for what I believe in. He's basically said, I'm not going to shift US national policy for political expediency. So just do your worst. And they tried everything. The reaction was frenzied. He was called an anti-Semite over and over again. But Bush Sr. held the line and he prevailed. And polls showed that 70% of Americans agreed with him on this. So, there is precedent. There is precedent. It's only happened a few times in the history of that diplomatic relationship. But I think that there will be case studies on this this exchange with Trump now, and the way in which the relationship has kind of like twisted and turned. And we got Trump saying, "Don't you fucking dare," and then we had them doing it anyway, and all that stuff. I mean, this is all just history unfolding in real time.
Yeah, no, it is absurd. So, I mean, just to sort of wrap this up, I guess, for this session, then, Alia.
Oh no, did I lower the tone?
No, not at all. I think that the sweet spot is like 40, 45 minutes,
Me
right?
too.
I mean,
Yeah.
what should we watch then? The Qataris are in Tehran. There is this threat of war will return.
Yeah.
The peace. I don't know. The longer this goes on, I mean, what time is it now? 20 to 10 in the UK. So that's what, like, it's 3-4 hours ahead in sort of Dubai, right? So I don't know. Are we going to see it, or are we going to see it sort of early in the morning? So yeah, so it's 20 to 1 in the morning. If we're going to see military action, it's usually within the next hour. That's sort of prime time, isn't it? Just after midnight in the early hours of morning, when the Iranians aren't, under the cover of night. If we don't see anything, I think within the next hour or two, then I'm not convinced we're going to see anything at all. What do you think?
Well, I just think he has to, based on what he said. He's got to do something. I see one of your commenters just said that something about how you can't scare the Iranis because they're crazy and they don't think logically. But it's true. They have a totally different conception of optionality, a different conception of time, a different conception of national interest, and a different conception of the individual's role and place in society. So it's very hard to balance against that. So I think, yeah, the conversation will be, whether they go tonight, as you say, in the next few hours. If it's going to happen at all, it will be in the next few hours. But I almost feel like there's been so much face lost for the president in all of this that I can't imagine that he would knowingly allow for another major incident where he, tacos or whatever that phrase is called. But obviously we hope that he does, because nobody needs any more escalation. As I say, this could quickly spiral out of control. The war is expanding in time and in space. But I think when we start hitting these sorts of targets, these, heavily civilian targets, and normalize that, and with the Iranians as strong as they still are, the Gulf states will be feeling very, very vulnerable. And there's plenty of scope for this to just to keep morphing. And I think, as we talked about before, the second and third order consequences that haven't been thought about yet. Not to mention the fact that we need to get closer to resolving the closure of the strait because of the moral emergency and the humanitarian emergency that's affecting so many children and civilians globally. So, yeah, it's an opportunity cost as well if we restart.
Yeah, well, it's the biggest opportunity cost is for the United States of America, and specifically Trump's reputation or administration. Not that he cares nor seems to be aware or capable of understanding that. But yeah, one hopes it won't happen, but one feels that it might. Is how I would summarize it. But Alia, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, everyone, for watching. Do check out Alia Brahimi's work and podcast. Remind everyone the name, where best to find you.
Yeah, so my podcast is called Guns for Hire. I've just started a Substack, which I'm getting used to, called Highly Irregular. I'm also on LinkedIn mainly, but I can be found. There's a shop front on Twitter and Instagram, but mainly LinkedIn. And always good to hear from you guys. I do hear from a lot of you, and it's great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I second that. It's nice to hear from you. It's nice to do these streams. As you know, I do them not as natural a streamer, I think, because I am a sort of pre-recorded guy. But yeah, if you enjoy it, then do, of course, like the video, subscribe, and check out the Substack. We are co-streaming. And if you're watching on Substack, subscribe as well. I'm doing much more over there, and I would love to grow it more and more and improve the quality of the content, and well, produce more writing as well. But we'll see you all soon, everyone, hopefully in better circumstances and not much actually happening. Maybe a stream collectively summarizing how boring and uneventful a week was in geopolitics, but somehow I doubt it. Take care.